So we've talked about software quality, we've talked about low code, we've talked about infinity. And if you paid attention, every speaker said the words technical debt. Every year we'll have new interesting topics, but also every year I think we need to talk about technical debt. Let's have a brief discussion about how that actually works at your organization. So first of all, if you feel like asking a question, please do so. Interrupt us, raise your hand, Adam will sprint and have a match with Femke, and then you can ask a question. Don't wait until the end, just ask. So to kick off, maybe it's a good idea to start introducing Keylane and the organization as a whole, and maybe the IT organization in particular.
Yeah, that's fine. So I work for Keylane. As already said, we work in the life and pension industry, and our mission is to empower our customers via technology. So we make sure that all the technology is in place. So that's also why we provide our software via a SaaS model, where we make sure that we provide the software, we do the infrastructure, we do the hosting, and our customer can focus on what they're good at in helping their end consumers. So that's being you as being a pensioner in the end. We have around 450 people working from us, working from different countries, Denmark, Netherlands, but also over 100 people from India working for us. And in that way, we develop, we think, the best software in place for, of course, the pension and life industry. That's a bit about Keylane.
What technologies do you guys use?
Mostly Java.
Mostly Java?
So we have our back office system are all based on Java. We also have some front office applications that run more, let's say, better stacks like MongoDB or like Vue.js, but our back offices are all Java-based. Yeah.
So we heard the term waterfall a couple of times now. Technical debt as a term is not as old as waterfall. I think it's from the 90s, Ward Cunningham. In the meantime, the definition has shifted quite a bit. What is technical debt for you?
Well, technical debt is, as you already see in the wording, it's a debt. It's a debt you gain through your software development process if you do things right the first time. But technical debt is not only in developing code. I think it's also in developing test automation or the proper documentation. So it's the complete package in the matter of software development. So it's not only code, in my opinion. And I also think that, let's say, if you take some shortcuts in the beginning, where you save maybe some costs, the cost of getting onto a par with your technical debt is way more higher. So in my opinion, you should always focus on prevention.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Yeah. So, but first of all, the size. So maybe it's a nice question for the audience. I like the energizing effect of raising your hand. So some estimate that the total amount of tech debt in a technology estate, I think that's McKinsey's term, is 20 to 40% of everything that's in an organization is tech debt. Who thinks their organization is in that range? Nobody.
No one.
We're much higher.
There you go. Thank you. More flowers for you. How's that for your organization?
Now, we're definitely at the maximum of that 40%, maybe a little bit higher indeed. But it seems like a much. But it also has to do because we have a quite clear insight in the technical debt we're having. With the tooling we're using, the way we measure our complete code base, we have a good insight in what we have as a technical debt, but it's quite high, to be honest. But it's also, as already mentioned, those cars. We also have some cars running in our organization.
That and already, some Mona Lisas.
Sorry?
And some Mona Lisas.
And some Mona Lisas, yes.
So this is a matter of the better you measure, the more you have. Also,
I think so too. And we will discuss maybe later. But we also created some guidelines, and we also said to ourselves, we don't have to solve all the technical debt that's in. So we also accept that we have technical debt. I see a question over there.
Nice, run.
No, Mike.
I like the running.
I get shouted as well. What triggered you to look at your technical debt?
Yeah. What triggered you to look at technical debt? I'm not sure whether people at home have a... Thanks.
I think it's a good question, and I also have to be honest. The trigger in the past came, let's say, more from customers. So customers that use our, let's say, our solutions, they kind of assessment on us. So how is your technical debt? How did you create your code? How is it maintainable enough? Is it secure enough? So it really started by kind of assessment, and currently it's more like a partnership. We want to be the best in class. We want to provide the best software available with less technical debt, of course. But the trigger was, in the end, I think, the customers at first. Yeah.
You already alluded to using guidelines. How do you manage technical debt in your organization?
By having guidelines. So we, of course, if you want to manage technical debt, you need to have clear insight. If you don't have the clear insight, you can't manage it. That's just how it goes. That's that easy. But also, we also created some guidelines on technical debt. So you can divide it in 3 areas. The first one is the most important, is how to prevent the technical debt. Just make sure you don't get it. The second area is we made some, let's say, guidelines on how do you refactor and when do you refactor. But you also made some guidelines if it's not broken, don't fix it. So if it's good, it's working. If there are no incidents in that area, then just keep it as is. Then so you keep your technical debt, you acknowledge that there is there. And that's the way we manage it. And besides that, we also created some coding guidelines. And the coding guidelines together, also with Sigrid and with our software engineers, it's just to get them, let's say, short on the feedback cycle. So if they create or develop code, then there is a quite short feedback cycle on how they develop it and what they developed, if they introduce some vulnerabilities or security incidents, so they can fix it and as of day one. And they don't get confronted by it some later on in the process. Also, the managing technical debt is also within our complete software development life cycle. So it's not only how you develop code, but also how you create your requirements. If you can create, let's say, your software first time right, and you don't have to make changes in the end, then you have more time to develop proper software. And if you have to change your functionality almost, then you get pressured by the business, and then in the end, of course, you make shortcuts and you create technical debt. That's how it goes. So that's also a part how we cope with it. So the guidelines, the software development lifecycle, but also we try to create, although it's quite hard to be honest, an engineering culture where software engineers really embrace the fact that they get helped by code scanning. It's not to blame them, it's to help them creating better code. In the end, the software engineers always want to create new functionality. They hate fixing incidents, so to say. So the less incidents there are, the better it is.
It sounds like a lot of work. So all of this effort, why? What do you get at the end of all this? And you also have to build functionality for your clients, which I guess is the key objective.
Yeah.
So all of this extra work, what does this get you? Why do you do it?
Well, I know there's in the title, there is the measuring return on investment, and that is really hard. I have to be honest in that area, because return on investment is based on multiple variables. It's not only your technical debt, it's also how it's already said, how the requirements are created, is your team set up, how is the knowledge, do you have fixed teams, yes or no, can you measure velocity in an agile setup? It's hard because the team setup changes, and it's also the same with technical debt. So it's quite hard to measure. But there are, of course, some areas where we think those are obvious. And with the obvious ones, I mean, if you really prevent technical debt, you also know that in the end, it's going to cost you less to maintain your software. And the obvious one is also, if you prevent, let's say, duplicate code, then you only have to fix the incident once. If you have duplicate code, you have an instance, you have to fix it multiple times, you have to test it multiple times, accept it multiple times, etc., etc. So also in that area, you can really measure ROI. But you can also measure on new functionality how many instances you get on new functionality. And that's also why I like the 4-star rating. You should always aim for a 4-star rating on new development code. Although you know that maybe your old code has other ratings.
Yeah, so you've used the word prevent a couple of times now, which I think when I go to organizations and talk about technical debt a lot, I think it's a very important topic, is that there are 2 ways of dealing with it. So either you inventorize what you have and solve it, or you prevent it. These are 2 very different things.
Definitely. Yeah.
So some organizations either say we have no technical debt, and most of the room here has no technical debt. I just
only one.
Only one. Higher. But they say either they don't want to know about it, or they say, we'll measure once a year and then see what's up and start fixing it. Why is prevention such an important point for you?
Well, as I said, if you develop code first time right, then the team who's working on the software still knows what he's doing. If you get incidents of loss back in a year, you never know what you did at that moment of time. So it always takes time to get into the topic again and to solve it again. So it's really a key to prevent things. And prevention can be done via the Sigrid platform, where you get fast information on what you're doing. In our development teams, we really do it on commit base, so every software that's being committed is checked, and they get the results, and they know if they did it right, yes or no. But we also put it in our definition of ready and definition of done. So development teams never start working on software if the requirements are not clear. But also, don't say your epic is solved if your definition of done is not met. And definition of done is not only if you have nice code in place, but also did you have proper documentation, did you have proper test automation. And I think in prevention, you should all, if you talk technical debt, and maybe you made an explicit choice to skip documentation or to skip test automation, always make sure that's in place very fast, because that are areas that you really gain money ASAP.
So you are in charge of a fairly large development organization. Now, I think people might recognize that steering developers is like herding cats. Developers have strong opinions about everything, and they're often right.
Yeah, true.
How do you make sure they comply with all these guidelines and all these these policies that you've created?
That's tough. Yeah. I need to be honest. It's quite tough to get development teams adhering to the guidelines you create. But it's also about explaining. If you explain people the why, then they quite often also understand the why, and they act according to it. And if you look at Keylane, we are providing software to let's say the main industry in life and pension. So they are all regulated by the Dutch bank. They all have compliance issues, and we just need to adhere to those. So we just can't say we're not doing it. And you can explain that to your engineers. And in the end, they will also accept that you have those guidelines.
Yes, so in a way you're helped by the domain you're in. Right? It's just
Sorry?
In a way you're helped by the domain that you're working in. That's already a bit more rules.
Yeah, there are quite strict rules in place. Yeah. If you look at the complete pension sector, they are regulated by the DNB, so the Dutch bank. There are all kind of controls in place for your information security. You just need to adhere to those. Yeah. And making sure that you also create maintainable software, but also the security and the vulnerability part, take that into account by scanning your code. It's just key. Yeah. It's key for us, but also towards our customers. Yeah. That you can showcase that we are in control.
I like how you talk about engineering culture, and I like to shift in the conversation a little bit towards people, because it's not really a technical topic, right? It's really a topic about behavior and about getting people to build these teams that you talked about earlier. It was very nice.
True, it is behavior, yeah.
So how do you, so we talked about waterfall a couple of times, how that's funny and old, and now there's agile, which by the way is also very old, it's like a quarter century ago. But that has this central notion, at least one of the modern incantations of agile, of autonomous teams. Teams, they know what they do it by themselves, they're sort of self-organizing, leave them alone, and magic software will come out. How does that relate to having guidelines? So you want them to do certain things, but you also want to have the benefits of this autonomy. How do you combine those things?
That's hard.
Yeah.
And it's almost impossible to combine. But you also need to make sure that we're not a startup company where you back in your garage started developing code and do all kind of nitty-gritty stuff and nice things. We are a enterprise company where we need to take things seriously. We have processes we need to adhere to, and also our people need to adhere to those. So sometimes people leave because of this, because they really like the startup mentality more, where they can do everything. But in our business, it's just it's necessary that they adhere to the guidelines. Yeah. And as I said, if you explain it, and if you also make sure that by the code scanning, you help the software engineer by creating better code. And in the end, that's what they want. That's what they get out of bed. They want to create good code. And so it's okay. It's manageable. Yeah. But it's hard.
You can have your cake and eat it.
Sorry?
You can have both benefits.
That's true. Yeah.
There's a question.
Yes, thank you. So you talked about behavior and developers wanting to write better code. It's a journey, and you explained that it's also a challenge.
Definitely.
Do you celebrate actual removal of technical debt or writing of high-quality code?
Good question. We not specifically celebrate those items. We have a lot of celebrations, a lot of events. We try to get our people in a warm bath, so they want to stay clean, of course. But this is maybe a topic we can celebrate. Good idea. Yeah.
Nice. More questions? No?
Yeah, I'm interested. You talked about the definition of done and the guidelines, but you also talked about preventing and the benefits that brings. Earlier today we heard about like productivity. In your experience working at Keylane and working with the Sigrid platform, but software quality in general, how do you see the trade-offs there? Do you see that prevention at the start, even though it takes a little bit of time to update your guidelines and stay within those guidelines, how does that benefit that productivity?
As said, it's hard to measure because there are more variables in the game than only technical debt. But we see a productivity increase around 20% by just making sure that you create the best code there is. And best code, then I mean the best maintainable code there is. Yeah.
Okay, maybe one more question.
You're about getting your technical debt to zero, basically?
No.
Or as low as possible?
Yeah, to an acceptable level, yes.
Yeah, but during the lifetime of a product, technical debt will arise anyway because of new rules, new insights or whatever. How do you handle that?
I don't see that as technical debt, to be honest. So that's already a matter of opinion, of course. But I think if a product works and it's there for a long time and it's still secure and performs in the right level, then I don't see it as technical debt. I also don't see a change, let's say, from Java to .NET or to Microsoft, whatever, as a technical debt. Of course, you have to do it. It's not that you don't have to act on it, that you don't have to innovate your product, but I don't see that part as technical debt. My opinion.
Mr. Werner, I have a question for you. If you say technical debt can't be down to zero, what is an acceptable level?
We didn't put it in a percentage on acceptable level, but we know in which area we want to improve and which area we keep untouched. And the untouched part, that's the acceptable level.
Okay. Jean-Paul?
Hi, Cor. What I notice in our company is that we're focusing a lot on software coding, quality, engineering, yada, yada, yada. Yeah. But we forget to think before we start doing. By that I mean there's a lack of design in place. Is that also something you focus on in your company?
Yeah, definitely. That's also what I meant with the definition already. So if the design requirements or business requirements are not in place and the development team don't understand what they should do, then we don't stop. Then we don't start, sorry. So, and also if we develop functionality for our customers, then there needs to be a customer sign-off before we start. So at least then you have a normal change management process in place. Otherwise, it's always a fight because I wanted this and you heard that.
Okay, we have time for one last quick question over here.
Question. What do you actually consider as a technical debt? Because if you think about dependencies, you may have some outstanding one. There could be some vulnerabilities, for example. Do you consider those as a technical debt? Because in my experience, those can't be prevented upfront since there is no new version available or vulnerability is not fixed yet.
Yeah, well, in my opinion, it can be prevented upfront. If you do immediately scanning on the code you developed, and you do it in your given guidelines, or your coding guidelines, and it adheres to those, then you have prevented your technical debt. But that goes together with the definition of done. So you need to have your documentation in place, you need to have your test automation in place, it's a complete package. And then I think if that part is met, then you're in the clear to go. And of course things can change in the future, and you need to adapt, that's true, but I don't see that as technical debt.
Okay, thank you very much everybody for your great questions. One last question, what's the main takeaway you want for everybody? What's the one thing you want everyone to remember from this live podcast?
I think the main takeaway is get clear insight in your technical debt, so make sure what's there. Create guidelines how to cope with it, and for sure prevent creating technical debt. I think that's the main takeaway.
Yeah, keep doing this, right? It's not. It's an infinite game.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Cor and Werner. Thank you, guys.